And now the Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 16th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Then Jesus told his disciples, If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they can see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Maybe I'm a little late to the game, but who has not heard of the Ice Bucket Challenge yet? I can tell from the sound of a few chattering teeth out there, I think a few of you have already taken part in this. But for those who may be unaware of what I'm talking about here, this Ice Bucket Challenge in its current form is a summer fundraising effort for the ALS Association. So ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and the spinal cord. So as you can imagine, the goal of the ALS Association is to fund research that can defeat this disease, along with supporting its patients and families who are battling ALS or some form of it. Now, what does ice water have to do with all this? Well, I'm glad you asked. About a month ago, some people posted a video on social media of themselves dumping a bucket of ice water over their heads. And in that video, they say they now challenge a handful of other friends or family members to either donate a certain sum of money or take their own video of themselves dumping ice water over themselves, or both, all in the name of raising awareness and funds for ALS research. And if, as I'm sure you all know, this phenomenon has exploded. In just over a month, the ALS Association has received over $100 million of donations, which is a little bit of an increase over the $2.8 million that they raised this month last year. And they received many of these donations from more than 1 million new donors. So that number of new donors, and added on to the number of people who just learned what ALS is by watching all their friends' videos, that's just a huge increase in awareness for this disease and the fight against it. All because somebody dumped a bucket of ice water over themselves and told others to do the same. And yes, Kim and I were both challenged, and no, we haven't done it, and probably aren't going to do it. Call us party poopers, if you will, but I don't think dumping a bucket of ice cold water over a pregnant woman is the best idea, and I'm going to stand in solidarity with her. And I've seen some of your reactions after you've done it too. Your faces have this look of, oh my, this might be cold, to saying, holy cow, that was terrible. I don't think I need to experience that. But I've been wondering, as many of you maybe have, why this challenge has taken over social media this past month. What has made scores of individuals and groups, celebrities and CEOs, doctors and firefighters, sports teams and office workers all want to donate to a charity and dump freezing cold water over their heads? What has caused millions of new people to donate over $100 million to a cause that they may not have supported in the past? I don't know. Maybe you know. Maybe there were some who felt compelled to take action because they knew someone personally who suffered from ALS, a friend or family member. Or maybe they knew somebody who knew somebody. I'm sure many of you have your own reasons for doing it if you did, and I'd like to know what they are. Or maybe, just maybe, people participated because they were asked, or invited, or challenged, or called. So through this ice bucket challenge, hundreds of thousands of people have literally heard the call to support an organization and to do something, to physically take action, to do something uncomfortable and perhaps out of their comfort zones, and to call others to take a stand as well. Concrete evidence that people do actually respond to invitations and calls in their life. It's pretty incredible watching it. And just like we recognized at the beginning of the service, there's this other sense of call that we are invited to remember this weekend. And that's our sense of call in our daily lives. Martin Luther believed in this call deeply, and as I said, he referred to it as our vocation. He believed that each and every one of us, every single one of us, is called and loved and sent out into the world in some sort of particular way to live out these vocations daily. Whether it's as a friend or a parent or an aunt, as a student or a teacher, a nurse, a farmer, a stay-at-home mom or dad, a plumber, a landscaper, a retired person, on and on and on to cover the myriad of occupations that are vocations that we occupy each and every day. This vocation, Luther went on to explain, is also seen as our Christian vocation, because we're called to live out our lives of faith in everything that we do, in our families, in our friendships, in our jobs, and in every part of our life. They're not separate by any means. Our vocation is a combination of all of these things together. And so to push this a little further, as we also heard this morning, part of this vocation or this calling is to take up our crosses and follow Jesus, living a life by following the example that Jesus set for us. That one, however, hasn't been quite as popular as taking up your bucket and pouring cold water on your head. Why is that? Well, I'm guessing picking up your bucket might be an easier task than picking up your cross. You know, this cross thing is an everyday thing, isn't it? It's 24/7, 365 days a year, whereas this ice bucket challenge, it's just a one-time, suffer through some miserably cold water for a few seconds and make your friends do the same kind of deal. Of course we're quicker to respond to something like that. I guess, too, that we're more apt to take up our vocations than we are our crosses. Because in some way or another, we've been prepared to do that vocation. You've learned skills or a trade through time spent in school or learning from a mentor or some sort of teacher. You've been given gifts or interests that help shape the type of things that you've decided to do in your life. Or in the cases where you may not have felt as prepared or been given much of any training, like parenting or being a thoughtful friend or knowing what to do in retirement, oftentimes you just have to do it. You know, jump right in and figure things out along the way. There isn't much option when those types of vocations in our life come along. It seems like it's sink or swim. But picking up your crosses, well, when it comes to that, we tend to have options, don't we? We can do sacrificial service from time to time, but if no one's looking or if we're not having a good day, well, just let those things slip by. We'll love our enemy and we'll love our neighbor and that guy on the street who keeps asking for money and those people who think differently than us when we can. but maybe not all the time. We don't have to. We've got this grace thing, don't we? No one's really keeping score. Plus, it's really, really, really hard most of the time to take up that cross and follow Jesus and carry it and keep carrying it. Because that cross can be heavy. And doesn't it ultimately mean suffering and death? Well, yes, it is hard. I'm not going to stand up here and say that it's not. Taking up our crosses often isn't as easy as the ice bucket challenge or our daily vocations. And yes, it can occasionally mean sacrifices, suffering, and death. But I can stand up here and say that because Jesus took up his cross, our crosses are not as hard to bear. And our crosses certainly aren't as wet or cold as buckets of ice. Our crosses, instead, are often, just a little confusing, and sometimes can seem quite backwards. We heard this morning that Peter quickly realized that, since just after last week, when Jesus was calling him the rock on which Jesus' church would be built, this week Jesus is now calling him Satan and telling him and his ideas to get out of the way and out of the way of the work that Jesus has to do. It's completely backwards for what Peter thought. And it's true, yes, that our crosses and our following Jesus might cause death, in the need for little deaths along the way. The death of how we think power should be structured, or the death of how we think we become first, or the death of how we think about who is who, or who is favored, or who is chosen, or who wins. It requires the death of our old lives and rebirth into new lives that are in and with and through Jesus. So yes, it can be hard, and it's often confusing, and it often seems backwards. But the thing is, Jesus does all of these things first. And then Jesus challenges us, maybe not through social media, but he calls us to follow and do the same, all the while doing them with us over and over and over again, so that we do know we aren't alone when we have to do them. That calling is a part of our life. That calling is a part of our vocation. And Jesus promises to be with us through it all. So this Labor Day weekend, I give thanks for all the varied ways that you all live out your vocations. I give thanks for the time you give to this community, to those around you, and to the challenges that come your way. And I give thanks for the one who calls us to take up our crosses and follow to a new way of living and accompanies us in that journey. Thanks be to God. Amen.